welcome to our Fireside chat on AI and human capital management. Did you know that board members and C-suite leaders are unaware of 86% of the risks associated with AI adoption? Well, the time to act to remedy this is now, and that's what today's session is all about. There's a famous saying that 80% of success is just showing up. So we acknowledge you for everything you did to be here today, and promise it'll be well worth your time and energy. We're delighted to have with us today 4 internationally acclaimed panelists who will be sharing their insights about AI and human capital management. I'm Kim Chernecki, founder of CEO Performance Advisors, and I'm excited to be co-hosting this fireside chat with my business partner, James Bonner, CEO and founder of the Bonner Institute for Purposeful Leadership. James, I'll turn it over to you to introduce our panelists today.
Thank you, Kim. I'm very happy to introduce our moderator, John Barker. John is an internationally recognized expert on AI and cybersecurity. He is the Bonner Institute's Senior Vice President of AI and a partner in the CISO law firm. He is also a popular event speaker and panelist. I'm also very pleased to introduce our distinguished panelists. Holly Castro is an independent board director. She is board certified by both Stanford University and the National Association of Corporate Directors. She is a 5-time CHRO with 3 decades of experience in technology, consumer, and energy industries. Holly is a human capital expert. Thank you. Joanna McDaniel Berkey is a former HP CISO who specialized in cybersecurity during her 3-decade career. She is now an independent board director and board certified by the National Association of Corporate Directors. Joanna is founder and principal of FlatRock Strategic Advisors. Catherine Yang is an accomplished business and technology executive with Fortune 100 companies. She is the founder and CEO of Insight Edge Ventures. She is also a member of the National Academy of Artificial Intelligence, a research fellow, a certified executive chair, and digital transformation expert. If you wish to get in touch with any panelists directly, we've put their names and email addresses in chat for your easy reference. Now, John, over to you.
Thank you to our panelists, thank you to our hosts, and thank you to our participants. I'd just like to set the scene, set the context for our discussion today by citing 3 different sources of information I find quite interesting. On the one hand, there's a pessimistic view of the adoption of generative AI in the enterprise, as revealed in the Writer AI survey of 1,600 individuals, 800 of which were either board members or members of the C-suite, corporate officers, as well as 800 employees in organizations that have adopted generative AI. It offered a pessimistic view of AI creating problems, building silos in the organization, causing cultural issues, and revealing disconnects about the existence or not of a generative AI strategy, with the executives and corporate officers perceiving there was a solid strategy and employees perceiving there was not one. On the other hand, we have a recent Harvard Business Review working paper, one of the authors of which is Harvard MBA professor Ethan Mollick. And that paper summarized the results of an experiment at Procter & Gamble, a consumer goods company. 772 R&D innovation employees were divided into groups. Some of the groups had generative AI as a teammate. Professor Mollick referred to this as a cybernetic teammate, and then other groups did not have generative AI as a teammate. The results of this experiment at Procter & Gamble revealed findings very different from the Writer AI survey. This experiment claimed that silos decreased that the business people and the technology people were able to better communicate with each other and produce better R&D results. Instead of reducing cynicism, increasing cynicism about AI, the teams that had AI perceived themselves as more effective. And thirdly, we have a very provocative quote from Mr. Bill Gates. And Mr. Bill Gates has said that within the next 10 years, the majority of human jobs will be replaced by AI, and there will only be 3 categories of jobs really needed to be performed by humans. And that is the energy sector, because AI will require a lot of energy, and AI will not handle the complexity of the grid. Number 2, jobs in biology. And number 3, high-level software coding jobs to verify the quality. With all of these diverse perspectives, I'd like to ask our panelists one of the questions from one of our audience members today. What are the leadership skills that board members and corporate officers need to have in this world in which some employees believe there's no strategy for AI in the organization, it's not working, it's destroying the culture, or I'm going to lose my job, I've worked so hard and invest to be successful in and create, what is my future in my organization? And board members and C-suite members who believe, I'll just replace my employees with AI and be profitable. How would you advise board members and corporate officers into this environment to manage the organization in the context of AI? Joanna, I'd like to start with you.
It's hard to pick only one.
I
I'm
know.
sitting here debating between nimbleness and active listening. I'm picking active listening for 200. Maybe one of my colleagues will talk a little bit about agility and nimbleness. But one of the biggest differences we're seeing right now with the rollout of strategies that are centered around AI is how they can no longer be defined, polished, perfected at a high level, and then rolled down like we've seen so many strategies in the past. You know, corporations at an enterprise level have kind of had an MO on strategy. Let's bring in our favored third partner of choice. Let's bring in some of our favorite advisors. Let's go to a semi-nice resort, but not too nice because someone, you know, might look at the T&E expenses, sit in a room for a few days, hash out something that we think is great for the company, polish it up really nice, go back, have the CEO roll it out at a town hall, get all the employees excited, then maybe have her talk about it on an earnings call to the street, and yay, verily, you have your strategy. We've had other types of strategy in the past that are more bottoms up and ground up. Like, let's take cloud transformation, for example, a very bottoms up, very technical strategy. It's okay to have that one sit under your CIO or your CTO. AI's brought in a totally different way of needing not only to define strategy, but how to monitor it, how to iterate on it, how to be sensitive to what's working, what's not working, not only technically working and not working, but culturally working and not working with our employees. So active listening, I think, is key at all the levels, including the board, to really not only think, you know, we always talk about board directors need to ask the right questions. Yes, they do. But they not only need to ask the right questions, but they need to really hear the answers. And I think if we're thoughtful about what we're asking, how we're keeping a pulse on what we're doing, including that workforce and their sentiments, both positive and negative, that ongoing requirement of active listening has to be in the room.
And Holly Castro, I'm going alphabetically by last name today. I'd like to get your perspective on this question.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. Well, Joanna and I talk about this a lot, and she probably knew that I would pick agility and agile thinking as a core skill that executives and boards need to have. So the notion that you think about problems in a very horizontal way, you solve problems, problem solving has changed. You know, you used to be able to solve problems in a silo. That doesn't exist anymore. And so problem solving from the customer perspective in, problem solving from a horizontal way and putting multiple voices on the problem, testing the problem, experimenting with the problem, failing and using failure as a way to learn about how to create better solutions. So I think agility and agile principles is a key leadership capability that is going to be required going forward. Another one I think is incredibly important, which really piggybacks on what Joanna was saying, is the notion of having deep curiosity. Deep curiosity, which leads to active listening, and not just surface curiosity, but really understanding intimately what sort of the nuances are of some of these challenges. And then the third thing, and this is kind of soft and might be met with some skepticism, but the notion of having empathy. So when you're creating culture, and I'll talk a little bit about this later, but when you're creating culture and you're creating trust in an organization, having empathy for your workforce and understanding your workforce, how they learn, how they lead, how they need to be communicated with, what those nuances are when you have 5 or 6 generations in your workforce. I think those are going to be sort of the skills that are absolutely required. Maybe the last one is judgment. You know, AI is learning at an incredibly rapid pace. It is, you know, something like we've never seen before. But it still requires human judgment to kind of test and make sure that you're really thinking through, is that a good answer to this problem, or are we missing something? So that's what I would say.
And of course, every time any of you make a comment, I have a brainstorm of wanting to ask another, 5 or 10 other questions, but I'm going to stay focused on this one. Catherine Yang, I'd love to hear your perspective on this topic.
Thank you, John. It's a great pleasure to be here. The question actually brings very complex, issues that most of corporations facing today. I'd like to address one of them, which is the employee's reaction when the AI enters the picture and sits in the center of the corporation growth strategy. I think it's very natural for the employee to ask, what does it mean for my job and my growth and my values? And if the employees feels, a threatened or concerns or worries about their future career growth, that's very natural, reaction. So as for CEO and the boards, and I think the most important job is really transparency and communication. So whenever the company embarks on the AI-enabled growth transformation, the strategy, changed, we have to, be transparent and communicate with the employee first, let them understand and what this new strategy mean for you and how these AI capabilities will benefit you and what are their limitations as well. And as the company grows and transforms, so do you. So we have to take a new perspective into the job definition. Job involves as well. So all this requires transparency, all this requires open and direct communications with employees, and so that we address any hidden, worries and concerns, and even, people feel threatened about this change. So the include employees and into this transparent and open communication from the start. That is a part of the strategy. I think whenever the C-suite embarks on the AI transformation, then the next step, of course, is really, as I said, AI doesn't replace, the job, but it augments it. But when we augment the job actually, the nature has to be redefined while the human being work with the, AI together in this job function. So that means that we have to, equip our employees with a new requires job skills. And some of the job skills really future-proofed. So offer these, tailor-made and personalized training based on the growth needs of the company and based on the changing job natures. That will be very essential once we talk to, how do we address the concerns? Okay, yeah, just a few cents. Yeah.
So I'd like to go back to some findings from the Writer AI survey that will lead to a question. And it connects to everything the three of you have addressed. Number one is the theme of employee retaliation against AI. In the Writer AI survey, 41% of millennial and Gen Z employees admit that they are proactively sabotaging the company's AI strategy, either by refusing to use the AI tool or the outputs of the AI tool. The main motivation being they're afraid of losing their jobs, and they experience the AI solutions in their enterprise as being of extremely low quality and therefore causing their performance to degrade. An adjacent finding in the survey is that 35% of the employees in organizations adopting generative AI have said that their AI experience inside the enterprise with enterprise-sponsored solutions is so poor that 35% of the employees are paying for AI on their own out of their personal fees and using it at home. This is shadow AI, of course, which raises significant legal and regulatory risks for the enterprise. So I'd like to shape this into a question. You've all talked about empathy and transparency and agility in AI adoption. What is the role of ensuring that multidisciplinary approach where board members, corporate officers, and employees throughout the organization, perhaps other stakeholders, including customers, collectively work on an AI strategy and collectively build up deep knowledge of AI? How much AI knowledge does a board member need? How much AI knowledge does a corporate officer need in order to be in that multidisciplinary team to set that strategy? And if you'd like to take my question in other directions, please do so. And going back in alphabetical order by last name, Joanna, would love to hear from you.
There are so many good directions to go with that one. I'm going to try to limit myself to one. I might mention a second one that can be webinar part 2 one day. The first thing that came to mind when I saw that Writer AI survey about the sabotage and the not only lack of adoption but a resistance to adoption is we have seen a rise of autonomy at work amongst the younger generations. And I remember it was probably 10 or 15 years ago. And I'll admit, I'm solidly in Gen X. It's not hard to figure out how old people are these days if you look at their LinkedIn. I am right in the middle of Gen X. I grew up where if you did, you did what you were told, you did the best you could, and maybe somebody would reward you for it one day. The first time I started hearing from my colleagues and seeing in my own organizations that we had, relatively new young employees at our companies who really not only wanted to weigh in on what the company did and how the company did it, but they actually thought that their opinion should potentially sway the company in strategy, go to market, even maybe pricing or target market segment. And I remember first time, hearing that, having a very typical Generation X reaction, which was, sit back and do your job, which I'm going to go and admit, very unhealthy reaction, by the way. I think now we've seen how this increased feeling of autonomy and ownership and value in the workplace are something that we can and should tap into for good. The younger generations especially are not opposed to using AI. The Writer AI survey and the findings from what Dr. Malik did with P&G show that people are very open to it in the right circumstance. It is on the company to tap into this desire to use it to figure out what the right circumstance is. We have a lot more people in the workforce now who are very resistant to just being told what to do when they don't see the logic or the reasoning behind it, but people who have a very strong feeling of ownership when they do feel that they understand the why and they see the benefit. So we have to tap into that. We have no choice but to tap into that. Or, at a minimum, our strategies aren't going to go anywhere. But to the benefit, it can make our strategies stickier, faster, and better, realizing that there's a way to turn this on its head and use it for good. And I really want to go off in a second direction, which is to talk about digital literacy in the boardroom, just like financial literacy. But maybe we'll do that later, or, someone else will want to take that one up at some point.
Well, I do think it's a very important topic because in the future, financial literacy will presuppose a foundation of AI literacy. I just like to note. Holly, I'd
Mhm.
like to move to you on this issue of how much knowledge does the board need, do corporate officers need of AI in order to participate in a multi-stakeholder, multidisciplinary team to set that enterprise strategy? And please feel free to take the question in other directions as needed.
Thank you, John. So my initial reaction to this question is to start with the humans, not start with the technology. Start with knowing who you have and who you need for the future. Does your talent align to the future? And if not, invest with extreme intention. Your AI strategy has to be people informed, not just technology informed, and really understanding your workforce and how it learns, how it grows, how it communicates, what it expects. If you're not listening to their expectation, I believe your strategy's at risk. And we're not dealing with a technology problem here per se. We're dealing with a trust problem when you look at that study. Some are quietly using AI to boost productivity, and what I see in that is they're diversifying their personal risk. They're hedging their bets. So they're taking this outside of work, and they're paying for their subscription, but they're hedging their bets. I don't ask Gen Z anymore if they have a side gig. I ask them how many side gigs they have and what they're doing in their side gigs, because they're diversifying their risk. So there's a lot of fear about how AI impacts, roles and the future of people's employment. And so that's why you're also seeing resisting or sabotaging. And resistance is basically rooted in fear. It's rooted in irrelevance. The poor sort of output answer is also a sort of resistance play. And when you look across your organizations right now, in 5 years from now, we are going to be 75% alpha, millennial, and Gen Z. And their tenure is really short. So what does that mean? They're averaging 2.5 years if they're millennials in organizations. And that becomes a very important business problem if you're churning talent that quickly. So when they feel safe, when they feel seen, when they feel supported, when they feel like they're learning and growing, they will stay. So to Joanna's point, they will give you their hearts and minds if they trust the culture. So when you think about board and C-suite engagement, what are they doing? How steeped do they need to be in the technology? I think the first question I'm asking is, what are their perceptions of AI? How are they using it? Are they just watching on the sidelines? Are they curious? Are they as literate in AI as they are in some of the financial things if they're sitting in the boardroom? And these are the questions that then lead to agility around business strategy. So at the end of the day, culture is your hidden infrastructure, and the transformation in your organization will happen at the speed of trust. So are you building psychological safety, which as Gen Xers, we may use different words, but humans want to feel safe at the end of the day, regardless of generation. And how clear are you being about your strategies? So that people can understand what it means to them. Those would be the things that would be rolling around in my brain, John, when I think about this.
Holly, thank you. You gave two powerful bullet points. I think almost should be trademarked. Very powerful. Catherine, would like to get your perspective on what's the level of AI literacy that must be inculcated at the board level and corporate officers and even enterprise-wide. And how do you approach that multidisciplinary strategy setting with multiple stakeholders at multiple levels in the organization and perhaps stakeholders outside the organization?
Thank you, John. I really like your question. I think it addresses the key concerns of most boards and C-suite facing the challenges today. And I like my panelists, Joanna and Holly. They pick up very good perspective and address that from human and from the board's readiness. To answer your question, I like to share from the board strategy and some best practice with our audience. One of the biggest failures in your example share is actually alignment missing when the corporate adopts the AI strategy. So when alignment missing, well, AI is immensely powerful. No one doubts that. But if employees and customers and executive teams or even regulators are skeptical about the AI strategy, about what they're doing and how to achieve it, data usage or decision making, adoption stalls. So without alignment, where the data scientists, HR, or business units share a common vision, a common strategy, AI project oftentimes will either duplicate efforts or ultimately undelivering the ROI that we set up for the corporates. So I think to tackle this question, I'd like to introduce the one framework, or we call best practice, to the board, to the C-suite, which is the trust framework, TRUST, stands for transparency, responsibility, understanding, safety and security, and trajectory. This framework has been widely adopted by Microsoft. When I was Microsoft as the corporate vice president leading the AI and cloud business, we actually established this responsible AI program using this trust framework, trains of about 140,000 employees globally. And all these AI projects, initiatives, and across the different business units, across different countries and regions. So this practical commitment to trust has allowed Microsoft to deploy AI solution eventually. Now we've seen that Bing AI and Azure Cognitive Services. And maintaining industry-leading governance and accountability. So this is a very good framework. And another best practice I'd like to share with the board is really OKI. So OKR is objectives and key results. These are proven methods aligning the teams on AI goals. Oftentimes, the CTO or the AI teams, and they define the user case, define the business problems, but not connected with the business team, not on their high priority, not even on the corporate's agenda. So competing agenda, competing resource lead to the failure execution. So these OKR actually can help the team link the big picture objectives and into their personal, departmental objectives and measurable KPIs. And so this is a very good framework, like Nesto as a good example. They use the people analytics aligned HR objectives. And then reducing talent flights and risk and into the tangible outcomes. So we can see a lot of successful lighthouse customer, and they actually using this framework to reduce the silos, to align the different stakeholders within our organization, even with beyond the organizations. So I think one key takeaway for the board is really when we integrated those frameworks, no matter trust framework or OKR or cross functions and COE's framework, we need to fundamentally minimize the AI adoption's risk that are coming from misalignment, coming from the misunderstanding, misalignment, and also misdeployment of the resources.
Thank you, Catherine. I would like to note one of the frameworks I like. I've developed a training program for boards and C-suites at the Bonner Institute, and I rely heavily on the National Institute of Standards and Technology AI risk management framework, specifically the govern function, and it recommends a multidisciplinary approach. We have a two-part question from one of our audience members, Shepard Farrar. And Shepard, I hope I've used the correct pronunciation. And I'd like to go to part two of your question. So boards must develop a digital strategy for the entities they oversee. And so here's the challenge, and this is interesting because I've actually done a lot of board training and I've done a lot of C-suite training, and I find that board members like to be trained in isolation. They don't like to be in the same training room with corporate officers because some are afraid of admitting they don't have knowledge, they don't want to look vulnerable, etc. I actually would like to shake that up. I'd like to have multiple levels of the organization training in the same room. That's very powerful. But Shepard asks an interesting question. So which executives in an organization need AI literacy training? What type of board training? How do you do it? How do you leverage peer board networks? And of course, there are many peer board networks globally. I think each of you is heavily involved in NACD. There's excellent thought leadership coming out. But what's the ideal way to ensure that board members not only receive AI literacy training, but also in the context of their organization? I'd like to start with Joanna.
I believe that there's one approach I want to throw out here that I think can benefit board directors, but I think can benefit a broader ecosystem as well. John, your earlier question asked about how you pull in your customer base, for example, as you are developing solutions for how your business operates. I believe more than ever what tools to use, how they're used for a given enterprise is a co-creation across a variety of roles and levels in that enterprise. We are, and something I've been thinking about and picking people's brains on a lot lately is we have so many functions, especially in the digital space, that have been siloed for so long. And these functions are and can be, privacy, cybersecurity, infrastructure, consent and compliance, you name it. There's so many of these functions. And I have noticed across companies how well these functions work together or not is generally a factor of the people who are in the roles. They are either people who know each other or see the benefit of working together but you don't generally have the organizational and methodology structures and frameworks to unite all of these things that span that risk and opportunity spectrum in the digital space. So with that said, I think AI is going to be a forcing function here because AI is not a silo, period. We cannot think of it as a silo. As a former operating CISO, I think about cybersecurity strategies. You cannot say, here is my enterprise cybersecurity strategy. Oh, and here is my cyber strategy for AI. Like you could do that with the cloud. Like that was legit. You really could do that. We can no longer do it with AI. And I think that is such a critical point here because we ask what executives really need to be part of this. I say every one of them. Full stop. Full stop. Every executive to a degree needs to have a level of digital literacy that includes some AI literacy because it will underpin and or disrupt everything that's going on in the business enterprise. That is a strength that when I say that, you kind of go, oh my God, that sounds really, oh my gosh, how do we do that? But I think that's actually a strength because we are not in a world where one person is going to determine the training strategy for everybody. the board chair is going to determine it for everyone else, and. We're in a co-creation world. So let's start identifying those folks across the enterprise who, number one, are natural leaders with their colleagues. What they do, other people follow, and or people who display a large amount of productive curiosity. Those are the folks, regardless of what level they're in, it doesn't matter what their title is. Those are the folks who have curiosity and fellowship. And those are the ones we need to tap with saying, help us figure this out for our company. Let's give those folks space in the boardroom. Let's have them spend time with their colleagues. Let's have them spend time with all levels of the organization. Pull your customer advisory board into this when you're ready. But when we find folks that are curious and or have fellowship, have them co-create the best ways to learn and use for your enterprise. That's going to be way better than any recipe, because every enterprise will be so different in this regard.
And I would like to note that one of the stakeholders involved is the legal and regulatory system.
Absolutely.
And that's another topic, of course. Holly, I'd like to go to you at this point. So how should boards acquire AI literacy? Should they acquire it in isolation? Should they do it in the context of an enterprise with multiple levels? What are the best practices in this area?
So I'll start by saying I fully agree with everything Joanna just said. So you'll hear some of my response to this is sort of amplifying what she said. You heard me say earlier, problem solving, whether it's at the board level or it's at the C-suite level or below, problem solving has fundamentally changed. It's not done in silos anymore. And when it is done in silos, you tend to have to do some cleanup afterwards, because there's sort of implications or sort of outcomes that you didn't anticipate or you didn't think through. So fundamentally, if you believe that problem solving has changed and you're doing it in a much more horizontal manner, you're using this concept of co-creation, co-creating with your employees, co-creating with other executives, co-creating with your customers to come up with the best solutions. If you fundamentally believe that, then you sort of have to step back and say, what kind of culture do we have? Do we have a culture that supports that? And what evidence do we have? What evidence do I see that we are not just talking about this, but we're actually seeing joint problem solving happening, and we're celebrating it. We're celebrating that. We're really communicating that this is how we like to work and this is how we get the best outcomes. So, as you think about how do you ensure that people are literate, if you will, in Gen AI and AI, the first question I would ask is, where are you using it? Where are you using it in everyday life? How many experiments are you doing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? And are you sharing the learnings from those experiments? I've sort of embraced very personally, trying lots of different things in lots of different dimensions of my own life, which is now led over into my personal life, my professional life, but really, really using Gen AI as a core tool to my own sort of daily life. And then the next thing I would say is this concept of agile principles. Do you really embrace experimentation? Failing is a part of it. If you're not pushing your experiments far enough, you're not failing. And if you're not failing, you're probably not learning. So are you really reflecting on those learnings? Are you sharing those learnings? Are you bringing diverse perspectives on purpose into problem solving, into the boardroom, into the C-suite? Are you using reverse mentoring? People that came up with this technology, they have a very, very different point of view than those who have had to learn it, sort of along their adult life. So those are the things that kind of come to mind as I'm thinking about this problem, and it's not an easy problem to solve.
Holly, thank you very much. Catherine, I'd like to move to you. The issue of AI literacy. Should the board learn in isolation from the corporate officers? Should the corporate officers and board learn it together? Or what's the involvement of other stakeholders. This theme of co-creation is very interesting, and please take this question in other directions if it makes sense.
Sure. Thank you. I love this question. When I on the board as the board director, we have seen that along the AI-enabled transformation, the corporation embark on this journey. The first leadership team exposed to the AI world, a lots of unknowns really board. So because when the board entrusted with oversight and strategy, then we really need to understand not just what AI can do, but also how to govern and leverage its responsibility for long-term success. So to answer your question, I'd like to address it from different perspectives, more practical, more tactical to the boards. The first one, I think, is common needs across the board. It's really AI fundamentals. It's the first and number 101 training for the boards and for the C-suites and for whoever drives and leads and implements these AI strategy in the entire corporate. So the second, I think, is really matters to the board. The training, they really have to gain this knowledge and literacy. It's really AI governance and oversight. So in this, we'll teach the board, how to recognize and how to implement AI governance and risk management framework across the organization, focusing on the director's responsibility and for the oversight, and that's number one. And then number two, in this AI governance, we talked about this before already, which is the alignment with the business goals. So it starts with the board. It starts with the boards that emphasize how AI must tie into the organization goals. And so the board can ask the right question and to the executive team about the ROI, about the resource allocation, about your short-term and long-term goals when you embark on this, AI transformation journey, and what are your strategic priorities. So the board actually plays a very fundamental, important role to influence and to oversight, to govern the AI transformation strategy. Number three, of course, in this AI governance, and we need to set the right KPIs and right reporting structures. And this all falls into the AI governance. The third, I think the literacy for the board, they have to gain is the ethical and regulatory consideration. It's brand new strategy for the board, because when we embark on AI, we actually been exposed to a lot of unknown risks and unknown challenges. And we really need to recognize importance of the ethical and the cybersecurity then exposed by AI. So the ethical AI principle help the board so take on this literacy, understanding this is highlight the fairness, transparency, accountability, human dignity, reduce the bias and reduce anything that could hinder the AI systems success in the organization. So it's important. I wouldn't undermine this importance. The other is the legal compliance requirements. Lots of industry like healthcare, finance, and industrial sectors, even transportation, and has highly regulatory requirements into this industry. So cover the data privacy, like GDPR, CCPA, those requirements, and emerging new AI regulations that imposed by the governments and by industrial associations. So these are very important. Corporate directors should first gain the first-hand information. They should know about this so that they can guardrail the AI, strategy and implementation for the company. These are the key literacy knowledge for the board. Last but not least is risk management and cybersecurity. I think Joanna and John, you both are experts in this regard. So the risk identifications and instant response and the third-party vendors involvement. These are all the best practice framework. I think whenever the first day you embark on the AI transformation, you got to have this in place. This is your best friend. So the last piece is strategy investment. So organic and inorganic. But these are the AI adoption strategy that you will consider in different stage. But long list for the board, but these are the fundamentals, I think, for the board to really to build up their literacy for AI strategy and adoptions.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And I wish we had another hour. So yesterday, the Chief Information Officer of Goldman Sachs, and I don't have the specific quote, but I can give the theme. He made a very interesting observation. He said, AI agents are already very smart. We have AI agents for financial analysis. Agentic AI is a hot topic. But the CIO of Goldman Sachs said the biggest issue is going to be, how do you train AI agents on your culture? Because your AIs will be learning from your emails and your decisions and your behaviors and your verbal communications. And so this CIO made the observation, there are many businesses similar to Goldman Sachs that do financial analysis and make recommendations. But Goldman Sachs has a specific lens and culture that distinguishes the financial analysis value it provides from competitors. So as agentic AI becomes more prevalent in the enterprise, how can you ensure that your AI agents, that cybernetic teammate, as Ethan Mullick referred to, how can you ensure that the autonomous actions those AI agents take are consistent with your culture, or at least not harming or undermining your culture? And Joanna, I'd like to start with you.
I think there's two tactical tools to use here, because it is an excellent point, and we're so early in our adoption of and experimentation with AI that we're just now starting to get to that question. We're going to have so many more of these nuanced things come along where AI needs to be different things for different companies and for different uses, right? It's not just one model that's going to solve everyone's needs. The two things I'd like to mention are, number one, the ability for AI to remember and use what it remembers in what it does is remarkable. So a company wants to tactically make sure that they are deploying models in a way where they have sufficient queue history, sufficient methods of interacting with people across the company, so that the model will be able to retain, maintain, and tap into what it learns about a company as it goes. It will be able to adjust based on what it learns about a company. I'm currently attending a directors forum here in another city right now, where yesterday the concluding speaker demonstrated this in his presentation. He showed us the difference real time of how a model that he works with day in and day out and has been using for a couple of months, how it addressed a question versus a model that he had just started interacting with that day. So you want to make sure you're engineering it, setting it up, and using it in a way in your company where you can take advantage of that. This is also where that human component is super important, especially right now and in the couple of years to come. We know AI is not ready for standalone, go it alone prime time yet. This is the ideal time to start re-scoping people's jobs to include how they work productively with AI to get the right benefits. This is not only going to help get the company-specific outcomes you need, but it's starting us down the road of how we redefine jobs. We have to redefine jobs. We have to redefine what we praise and reward people for. So let's use that use case to start figuring out that appropriate human involvement for the cybernetic and the neurosymbolic parties coming together.
Very interesting. Holly, what is your perspective on how you ensure that AIs, in particular AI agents, are at least learning from your culture, reinforcing your culture, but at the very least, not undermining your culture, that culture that persists?
Yeah, I love this question. So the first thing I would say is, as you think about deploying AI and AI agents in particular, especially AI agents that are acting autonomously, really be thoughtful about how many nuances you have or need to have to the problems that the agent is solving. So you've seen a lot of companies completely get rid of customer service or customer experience groups and deploy AI agents. And in some cases, it's very successful, but in other cases, they're having a lot of problems. So that might be an indicator that it was a little early, that they hadn't done the proper thinking, or they hadn't put the right safeguards in place to ensure that those AI agents are in fact representing the culture to the customer. I mean, that's an outward facing, so it's not even an inward facing. The second thing is this notion of human interaction above. So my personal experience in working with AI and lots of different models is it's learning at an incredibly rapid pace, but you have to treat it like an early in career employee, almost like somebody that's learning and hungry for feedback, and giving it lots of feedback and nuanced feedback becomes really important. So, when you run an experiment and the answers come back incomplete or lacking those things that you would want to see around a corner for a strategy. If you're seeing those kinds of things, that tells you it's not quite there in terms of the learning. It doesn't mean it won't get there, but it's not quite there yet. And so just really using some discernment and judgment. And this is where I think you have all this opportunity to leverage different parts of your workforce to teach, to also ensure that the right amount of thought has gone into a particular outcome or strategy, and really leveraging all of the expertise in your workforce, which then creates trust. And we talked about this, so a lot of people have a lot of fear right now. And so creating more trust by using these types of experiments, but also putting some guardrails on them, I think is a pretty good way to think about this.
Thank you so much, Holly. The final comment, Catherine, and then we'll move to Kim Chernecki. Any thoughts on how one can align AI agents with the culture?
John, I love this question. I meant it because this is what I'm doing now on the boards with a global powerhouse. We're just piloting AI agents in transforming the culture as part of the HR initiatives. So training an AI agent on corporate culture involves more than just fitting policy documents or mission statements. It requires delivering the culture, values, and behaviors and decision-making principles into the data and also into the model learning process. So I would like to just share some high-level approach that I'm practicing with lots of global companies that are on the boards and driving this culture transformation with AI agents to help maybe audience understand how AI agent can help city not minimize or intimidate, but actually reinforce the culture change. I think the first one start with defining the culture, values, and behaviors. We have to clearly outline the company's key values, such as integrity, teamwork, or customer centricity, or innovation. And those data that we have to define as using is, data specific and real world examples, that demonstrate how those values can uphold, or bridge the corporate culture in the day-to-day operation. So that's first step. The second step is really collect and curate the relevant data. So we have to gather the handbooks or policy documents or codes of conduct or internal memos and leadership communications and anything that in the entire corporation that actually, or historical records, then help us to collect the good quality of data around those quantifiable cultures. Then the third thing is really, help the model understands and help the AI agents understand how to embody or reinforce those culture. For example, should the agents flag decisions that contradict the values and make recommendations aligned with those values? So what the models should do then really based on this. And we also need to design interpretable architecture where we use some those transparent explanation and recommendations and into these models, the model can explain and can help us understand and align with the corporate values and cultures. In the last step, it's into this model training is really human-led review and guidance. So we need to form a team with a group of employees or subject experts within the corporation, across the board, across the business units, then to label this training data according to the culture, do's and don'ts. So we really ensures the AI agents to see very clear examples of what behaviors consider as culturally correct. So once we have done this, then we have to validate and test. So the culture alignments, and these will help us to, make the model understand and to translate this invisible culture, but into visible and measurable approach. Then reinforce this code. These AI agents can really mimic, understand, and copy the human good behaviors and help us to reinforce it. So once we deploy it, monitor it, and reiterate it, it's a closed loop. So people will learn from it. And then again, the AI agent will also learn from this. But again, the culture and the human capital is really the center, the most important asset of the company. So if we can leverage AI to augment it, they will fantastic. And this will set the company apart from the competition.
Joanna, Holly, and Catherine, thank you very much. This session has raised more questions that I wish that we could have another session on. Maybe we can one day. I'd like to turn it over to Kim Chernecki now. And Kim and James, thank you for hosting us today.
Absolutely. Well, James and I would like to recognize and thank our panelists and moderator for your insightful participation. That was amazing. And as all of you on the Zoom today would have seen in chat, we're pleased to offer a complimentary 30-minute strategy session to explore your organization's risks and opportunities around AI and possible ways moving forward. So please click on the link and to secure your spot. And finally, you'll be receiving the recording to this panel discussion in the next day or two. Also some resources that we're going to share. We're going to send in a follow-up email as well. So thank you all so much today for attending. And thank you all again, and have an amazing day or evening or wherever you are in the world. I know there's someone joining us here from Australia, and take care. Have a great day, everyone.